Hi, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Olivia. I still don't know what I'm naming this. All I know is that it is ballet related, and I'll be talking all things ballet. I want to make it relatable and talk about the ugly side of ballet, as some people talk about it, but it's like very few. And also, I just enjoy this. So I tried to make a ballet setup. My mom embroidered this. I have point shoes here, which are dead. And disgusting, that I've used to like take photos outside and things like that. But yeah, so this podcast will, I'll get a lot of recommendations off of my TikTok and just private messages. So if you have something that you want me to talk about, you can feel free to either message me or comment it on a TikTok video where I talk about this. Probably easier and better if you just message me about it. I also have a Discord with anyone who does ballet or wants to learn about ballet. So messaging on there would actually also be an even better idea, and you can find that in the description below, or if you're listening, it would just be easiest if you went to the video and found it, or if you went to my Instagram and checked the link in the bio. With all that being said, this video is going to be based around tips on starting ballet later, also my unpopular opinions on ballet, having started ballet later. And I think the advantages and also the disadvantages of starting ballet later. That's a lot of different things, so hopefully I cover it and it's not too complicated. At another point I'll explain my story of how exactly I started ballet later, and even though I kind of didn't, but at the same time I did, I'll get into that at another point. Just keep it straight to the point of, tips, because I think that's a lot more relevant, a lot more interesting. So my unpopular opinion number one, which is for ballet in general, is that you have to spend hours and hours on end in the studio. I know a lot of companies and obviously schools, they have you there for like 8 hours a day. I don't think you need that, and that's just based off my own experience. I was in a very bad space, both physically and mentally, and I only trained for a 2-hour class 4 days a week. That's not all I did, though. I spent a lot of time just dancing at home alone and practicing, of course, on the side, and also practicing for always at least an hour before the class, and then sometimes and up to an hour after the class. So you do need to put in a lot of time, and I think that's a huge game changer as well, is just spending time out of the ballet class. You need to put in the time after the ballet class. Ballet class, you're doing stuff and whatever, but it's only after, when you're alone, do you actually have the time to take the time to just feel your body, understand your body, and that's a huge, huge advantage. If you're a late ballet starter, this is a huge advantage. You're older, so you are a lot more aware of your body. That is honestly a huge, enormous plus, because you can understand how your body feels, how you can find balance, how you can turn better, how you can jump better, how you can feel your turnout better, how you can hold position. Everything and anything, if you're a lot more aware of your body, huge ultimate game changer. That was like the biggest thing, and that's where Maria Kareva, I think, stood out hugely in her exam, and Ballet with Isabella, her podcast, she recently reviewed or did like a commentary on their exam. So I think it was 2018 exam was when she graduated, right? She was saying that, she spent a lot of time outside of ballet class in the studio alone. In my opinion, just based off my own experience, it doesn't exactly matter what you're doing as long as you're finding some way to work on something. And I think this just leads into my other unpopular opinion, is just working like a workhorse until you're dead. I think that's very stupid and doesn't really work. I think it also just depends on your personality. So if you're someone who just needs to have at it for hours on end, and you don't feel, or you know that you won't be accomplished without that, okay, you can go ahead and do that. But for me, and I think this can be relatable for a lot of later starters, for one, you don't have the time because either you're working or you are studying or whatever it is, and also you're older, so you don't have quite as much like crazy energy to just go ahead and have at it. So what I found was the most effective was I would keep working on something. For example, my pirouettes, I would keep working on it until I got a clean, absolute clean triple. And if I felt, because I'm practicing so much that I'm aware of my body, if I felt that I could do that again, I would do it one more time, and then I would stop and leave. And why I would do that is because I will remember that in my body for the next day, and then repeat that the next day, and then that just accumulates. So you're getting muscle memory of a proper pirouette or proper technique, and it can apply to anything and everything. Russian training is very different in that you have to do a lot of these very weird fouettes and combinations and very difficult technique, which honestly is like not really used in ballet, but it's very interesting and good to do, to feel your body and to be able to do anything and everything, because you never know, you might have to do it. Like Bayadere in the Act 3, the Shades act, where she's doing the dun 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 fouette dun 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 dun, and you have to go from fouette to fouette. That is barely done in any Western schools. They do it, obviously, they practice fouettes and things like that, but to get it to where you're very comfortable, fouettes and weird maneuvers like that, huge thing in Eastern European Russian ballet, pure classical, like strict, especially also in French. So doing stuff like that, once again, I would practice it. There was this one, I think it was in January when I was retraining again. I would only practice that one step from Bayadere, the fouette from front attitude effacé to attitude effacé back, which is not easy, to make it look easy and simple and to feel the balance, because it's a lot of stuff that you're worried about and working on. I would only practice that. And sometimes I'd practice my pirouettes, but not really, which is why my turning is not great, which is another huge issue for me, is turning. I can turn, and what I post online, it looks like I'm a great turner. For the most part, I'm comfortable with doing doubles on both sides, but I just have this huge mental block, understandably, because I'm traumatized. When I was 15, I had to do this like grand finale of a double pirouette with two other of my classmates on stage, and I was front and center. I was placed in the middle, front and center, and I didn't face plant. I fell out of it terribly, and I've been traumatized ever since. That's another huge thing I think isn't really talked about, is like things like that in a performance, then you are like mentally blocked, and how do we get out of that blockage? So I'm honestly still working on that a bit, and I would love to talk about that at another point, but that is for a whole nother time. Another unpopular ballet opinion that I have, which a lot of people don't do, which I don't get, ballet is very theoretical, it's very mathematical, it's very logical, I think you need to spend a lot of time studying it. I don't think the physical activity of it alone is enough to achieve great technique, great everything. Obviously you have to be an artist as well, it's an art form, but I don't think enough time is spent actually studying it unless you, let's say, go after to university and study it. So that was another huge game changer for me, was just taking notes. And I'm going to go through my notes. I'm looking at them, 5 books filled with notes. And that was the ultimate game changer for me, because then it forces you to remember corrections. It forces you to think, oh, why was the teacher saying that? Let's see why we do this. And it kind of, I'll read them at another point and you'll see that it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, a huge tip, I think, for a later ballet starter to get stuff quicker and to understand why we do certain things in certain orders and everything, is to read a book like, I have it somewhere here, the Vaganova book for the Vaganova method. It's very short. It's like this little tiny skinny book, and you can flip through it. It has pictures too, so it can keep you entertained. Oh my god. It can keep you entertained. But it just helps you to understand a lot more why we do certain things, and why, for example, in Russian ballet, when they're doing tendus front and back, why you need to look directly to the side. There's other schools that look kind of diagonally, but we look to the side. When we do soutenu to the other side, we look from one side and we quickly change our head around to the other side. This is to practice spotting for the center. It's practicing the coordination, why we go through first position. Also, when you're at one side and you turn quickly to the other side, is to practice the coordination. So Yeah, I don't think that's done enough in schools. I know that there's a lot of great Balanchine dancers out there who turn a lot and whatever, but I'm very off put by the fact that everything is done face flat on. I know that everything is very fast, so it would be very confusing if you're moving your head around a lot, but I think it's very underlooked in the Balanchine space. I don't know. I don't take a lot of Balanchine. I've taken a good 3 months of it, and I still don't get it, and I'm not... I don't know. After you learn Russian, you might hate it in the beginning. It seems so intense and difficult, but after you learn it, there's no going back. And I think, I don't know if that's just me, but I think that's the case for most people. Anyways, so yeah, that's a huge thing that I preach on about, is taking notes and taking notes and looking at it very theoretically. I think there's a lot of forms of like geometry to ballet as well. There's certain reasons why we do certain positions and things, why we do certain movements. There's a lot more to it, like energetically. I know I'm getting a bit, this might sound stupid, but there's like a lot of different art forms, like Qigong, for example. It's supposed to be moving energy, and you're kind of like rebalancing your energy and your chakras. So I think there's a bit to that in ballet, and I think, or there isn't, but we can take from that and apply it to this. So there's reasons why we do certain things. Like I think it can be very healing as well to do ballet, and that's a whole nother topic. Is a lot of people actually use dance as a therapy, which I think is great. I think it's a great form of a coping mechanism, and I think that's also a reason why a lot of people get into ballet. Most artists have art, or they create art because of a certain place from something that happened to them, and that is a whole other episode that I'm going to have to talk about at another point, is why people dance, why I dance, and maybe we need to look into why we're dancing. So another huge, I guess not huge, but another unpopular opinion I have for late starters who don't want to go professional. So this won't apply to everyone. You can take a bit of this for if you are professional, but I think so coming from my background of first dancing because I wanted to dance and just dance, I didn't really care about technique because I didn't really understand it. I thought, this is stupid. I can do the movement anyway, so why do I need technique? And then going from that spectrum to the opposite spectrum of zero soul and art form in my dancing to just solely theory, technique, whatever. And now I'm trying to combine the both, because obviously you need to have both for it to be an art form. It can't just be one or the other. You need to have both. For ballet to exist, you need to have technique. For technique to exist, you need to have, for ballet to exist, you need to have technique, but you can't just have technique. You have to have the artistry and the love and the joy and the art form. If it's going to be an art form, you need to have the actual art. Art is art because there's something to it that makes people feel something. They can relate to it in whatever way. And if you have just the theory, that's not really relatable unless you're mathematician, I don't know. But you also need to appreciate that ballet also has a technique to it, so then that's what makes ballet. So whatever, you need to have both. Where was I going with this? I don't know. So after coming from both of those spectrums, I think some students get very caught up on having the technique, and then from having so much or working so much on that technique, they lose the ability to dance. And that just comes down to, do you have a good teacher, or do you need to change your priorities and how you're dancing? And I think that's a huge thing, because that's what happened to me. I wasn't dancing because I wasn't dancing. I wasn't trying to dance. I wasn't trying to lose myself in the movement. And yes, you need to have the technique, you need to have the whatever, but it comes down to people who are coming to watch you. They don't really understand the technique, but they understand the emotion that you are portraying, or that you are displaying, that you are giving off. And obviously you need to have technique, like I just said, if you are auditioning for a company, if you want to get into a company, if you, anything related, because that is ballet. But it also comes down to, you need to have that other aspect. If not, then it's not interesting. It's not interesting to watch. If you're looking at it as a teacher, coming from a theoretical point of view, very, very interesting, very stunning. I've seen amazing dancers in person, both my ages, older and younger, and I think, wow, that's amazing. But then at the same time, you're like, well, I've seen that. That's kind of all there is to it. So what I'm trying to say is, I think it's more important to, especially as an older dancer, not worry so much about the technique, but to try and just get the coordination and the movement down. And then if you're professional or professional student, yes, you need to always be pushing your best for technique, but to not forget that this is also an art form, because that's what separates it. That's what makes it absolutely different. And that's what makes it, I think, the most difficult thing to do is, you're an athlete, you're also an actor, which nothing else really has. I think ice skating is very similar in that it's also acting, and it's also obviously very athletic. It is an art form, and it's also very athletic, but you're also acting. So I think those are the very difficult things. But I think what's very different about ballet is that it's a huge storyline that you're following, compared to ice skating. I'm just comparing it to ice skating because I don't know what else would really relate. Where, yeah, there's a storyline, it's kind of vaguely based on something, but it's not like a full-on 3-act ballet based off of a book or a poem that's 300 years old. So I think that's the main difference, and that's what makes it very difficult, and that's what separates just an athlete from, or a dancer from, an actual art-giving dancer, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. Yeah, so I don't want to make this too much longer. I kind of want to keep these at 30 minutes, roughly, which it's not going to be. It's going to be way shorter, probably. But I want to give my tips now on what I would have done differently if I had to start ballet older again, if I had to restart, what I would have done differently and what you could do. This is just based off my own experience, my own opinion, so obviously consult with a professional, blah, blah, blah. All that disclaimer stuff. My main tips if I had to restart ballet at the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, whatever it is, and I wanted to actually be pro, was what happened with me was I was training originally in ABT, which is based off of Cicchetti method, if I'm not mistaken, and then switched to Vaganova, which is severely different. Looking at it as an outsider without much understanding, or with some understanding, it could be like related. It's not. It's very, very, very different in that obviously Russian Vaganova training is so very rigorous. It's very difficult. Everything is technique related, like I was mentioning earlier with the whole fouette thing, which I didn't think I would get into. There's a lot more to it than what meets the eye. It looks like you just can be flexible and then strengthen and get technique, and that's arguably a way to go about it. I don't think it's the best way to go about it. But yeah, very difficult, very demanding. So what happened with me, and this is what usually is done with Vaganova, so of course this was what the teacher was going to do. My teacher was a graduate of the Boris Brigvadze class, all the way back in, I think, the 80s, so very strict, obviously, and would take some Dudinskaya classes, or so they told me, and was, very strict. And what was very different was a lot of, I think, American Western schools, they say, only go to where you're comfortable, push each day, of course. Obviously, you need to push every single day to actually receive any form of results. Russian method was, I don't care where you are now, today you're going to reach that position. No argument. And that's why they have a very different way of choosing new students into their school. They have a certain body type that can immediately achieve those positions. So narrow everywhere, really. Because you can, like, let's say, not realistically, but within the first months to years, a year, not years, but year, you just immediately force their body into that position, and it will be able to achieve that because of the narrowness. I am not that body type, but I forced my body into those positions, and it worked until it didn't, which is why I don't recommend doing that. What works, I think, if you're older, is you don't want to quit ballet class, but I think what's very important is to work on spending a good 3 to 6 months doing very, very basic foundational things, and that would just be plie, tendu, jeté, maybe working on some fondus and rond de jambes because you want to work on that mobility and that range of motion. But I think apart from doing that, you need to be doing strengthening and mobility. I think mobility is very important because if you have the range of motion, if you can work on the range of motion, then you would just need to strengthen it a bit more to then either have higher extensions or do difficult maneuvers like those fouettes, once again, that I always go back to, or whatever it is. If you have the range of motion, it's about then just implementing it and getting comfortable with doing it. So I think mobility is a huge thing. If I had to go back, I would work on a lot more than I actually did. So mobility and very, very basic foundational things for a good 3 to 6 months. It depends on the person, on how much time that you need. I'm still mind blown that the teacher that I had got me to a pretty decent level, I would say, in less than a year, with only doing 4 days a week, 2-hour privates, 4 days a week, that's it. And I got asked why I was only doing 4 days a week. It's because it was so expensive. It was very, very expensive, and I wanted to do 5 days a week because I was used to that, and he was like, nope, I think 6 days a week is important because that's how Vaganova, that's how a lot of schools are. It's 6 days a week because you really need a lot of time. And I was like, well, okay, I can't pay for that. And then, so I did a full year of 4 days a week for only 2 hours. It was supposed to be an hour and a half, I think, but we always went over because we needed to. And then apart from that, I would at least have an hour before that of exercising and warming up, and then up to an hour after that where I would just stay at the studio alone. And I think that is the ultimate tip that I can give you, apart from taking notes and note-taking and studying ballet as a theoretical thing when you're starting later, is staying in the studio longer, because like I was saying earlier, if you can understand and feel your body and understand what works and where you are, where your center is, that is everything. You can do adagio better. Doesn't mean that you'll have higher extensions, but you'll be able to hold positions. You'll be able to hold your body because you understand where the balance, where the center is. And I think that is the ultimate the ultimate tip and takeaway, that's what I was going to say, to gaining that awareness, is finding your center. Without your center, you don't have much. So finding your center and studying the theory and working on foundational things and mobility, and you're good. That's a lot of what you need to just work on ballet as a later starter, or even if you're a professional already and you've started younger, and if you want to improve mobility for range of motion, working on basics, even if you've been doing tendus for years on end, you can never do enough tendus. This past half of December and all of January, I was training again with this teacher, and I'm going to get into this at a whole nother point. It's very important to find a supportive teacher who has your best interest in their mind, which was unfortunately not the case with my teacher. I might get into that, I don't know. Anyways, what was the point? Oh yeah, so I was training again with this teacher for about a month and a half, and this teacher would already give me 5 different tendu combinations in the class in total, and most of the time 2 jetés, so that's 7 very similar combinations. I know a lot of people hate tendu. I hate them, but I love them. If I don't do tendus, that day is just going to be a bad day. But apart from those 7 combinations that I was given, I would do an extra 4 combinations before the class even started. I would do 2 facing the bar in first position, and then I would practice 2 tendu combinations that we would do in the class at the bar from 5th position before the teacher came in. And yeah, I think that's another huge important thing, is which I really appreciate from Russian schools, which I have not noticed to be a thing in Western schools, is Mondays you come in, you're given a class. Tuesday you do the exact same class. Wednesday you do the exact same class with an added maybe instead of balance of passe at the bar, you do a pirouette. So there's like a tiny level of difficulty added on Thursday, same thing as Wednesday. Friday, same thing again. Maybe you add another more so slightly difficult thing. And the huge advantage to doing that, and that's how I was retrained, which I think gives you a lot of, it has a lot of benefits. It gives you a lot of time to not worry about what the combination is, but to perfect it. And it's the same with like a variation. You do it once after you taught it, it's going to be terrible, of course, because you've never done it before. But if you're allowed to do that for a full week, then you can perfect it. You can work on the tendus more. You can focus on actually working on the technique and not trying to remember the combination mid-combination. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not noticed that to be a thing in a lot of Western schools or Western whatever. I think the most, in my school when we were doing ABT, we would do the same class maybe twice, and that was it. That was absolutely it. And maybe we would repeat the same combination the second day, but then there was always a different combination for something. We had one teacher, though, for 1 year who would make us do the same class at least 3 days a week, and I didn't understand the point of that until I went and trained with this Russian teacher, but I think it's very good to do that. And even if you're not doing the same class every day, going back the next day and repeating the combinations before the next class from the previous day, if that makes any sense, is a great benefit, because then you can work on the technique, you can work on the actual important stuff and not just worry about the combination. And I think that's a huge disadvantage to ballet, is not being able to do the same combinations, because then you're spending a lot of mental energy on, oh my god, I need to remember what I was told to do, and I can't remember or think about these billions of other things that I need to think about. And I think that's really underappreciated in ballet, is the amount of stuff that we need to think about is crazy. How much opposition as well, like your ribs and stomach tucked in, but your chest sticking out, your hips pushing up and out but not tucked, but they also need to be kind of tucked but not really, and then your knees back but not too back, and then your ankles and your hips forwards. And yeah, there's a lot to it, and that's just a structure. That's just standing still. Oh yeah, sorry. Chest out but shoulders down, your lats pushing back and forwards, but you don't want to be sticking outwards like a duck, and you need to have your shoulders down, your elbows turned out in a certain way, and your hands in it. There's a lot to it. Your neck long, yeah. So if you're struggling with ballet, just remember that it is very difficult. It's fine. But you still need to focus on it 100%. And yeah, with that, I think I'm arriving upon the 30-minute mark. I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, let me know what else you would like me to talk about. Either message me or in the comments below if you're watching this. I do want to get into body image probably in the next one, because that is a huge one. So let me know what other topics you want me to talk about, and if it's interesting, feel free to like and subscribe. I want to do call-ins. I think that is a huge, cool idea. So calling in people, if you've joined my Discord or you've messaged me, calling in if you feel comfortable sharing a story or something. I think that would be interesting and somehow a nice way to incorporate the community. So yeah, let me know if that's of interest and if you want to do that, share a story, because I've already received a couple stories that either people want me to read aloud or they want to call in and tell themselves, and I'm thinking of keeping it to like a good 5 minutes so it's not so long, and I can do several, and not just keep it to a very limited amount. So yeah, anyways, hopefully I come up with what this podcast will be called. It's not easy trying to find a name. Anyways, so yeah, you'll know it. Yeah, thanks for listening or watching, and I hope you find this interesting. And if you want any advice from me, feel free to message me. I also do provide a bit of coaching. yeah, thanks for tuning in.